I was working for a large company in New York City back in '68, and my draft number came up in the Greensburg draft board, and I was called into the service in March of 1968. And I went to Fort Hood, or not Fort Hood, but Fort Dix, New Jersey, in March of '68, and did basic training there. And that was quite an experience. It was cold and windy, not unlike today. And we finished 8 weeks of basic training. And right after basic training, the push for Vietnam was pretty intense because of the Tet Offensive and all that. And I was sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana, a real old fort down by Shreveport, Louisiana. And I did 9 weeks of advanced infantry training. MOS would be a 11B-20. They taught us to do everything that you could think of as far as demolition. We did all kind of armament training, and the anticipation that after you finished with Fort Polk, you would be sent to Vietnam. And in my case, that didn't happen. They took half of the fort to Vietnam, and the other half was dispersed over all of the United States. And I was sent to Fort Hood, Texas. It's an armament fort, but I didn't actually go to Fort Hood. I went to North Fort Hood, which is about 30 miles from the main fort. And we were to help assist the National Guard in the summertime. They would send in their troops every couple of weeks, and we would set up for them. We set tents up and things like that. And I was there until December, when they closed Fort Hood, North Fort Hood, which is up around Waco, Texas. They closed the fort, and you move back to the main fort. And then they collected all the people that had been trained at Fort Polk to go to Vietnam. And went to Oakland, and I met all the others that had gone into training with me, like 6 months before. I was sent to Vietnam. When you go into that type of service, you're here in the United States, and everything is just like it would be normally. And then you get on a plane, which some people went by boat. I went by plane. So you left Oakland and flew to Japan and then on to Saigon, Ton Snook Air Base. And we got off in the middle of the night. I think it was Flying Tigers that flew us over. It was like 230 troops in a commercial plane. And we got to Ton Snook, and they threw all the duffel bags out on the ramp. They shut off a couple engines. And then all the people that were leaving after their year of duty in Saigon or Vietnam, they would get on and razz the new troops that got off. So, it was like a transition. Within 15 or 20 minutes, the Freedom Bird had gone, and we were there. And it was odd, the transition was so quick. Everybody was talking on the airplane until we started to let down to land, and there was this odor that you could smell. I still remember today from the fires and things that were burning, on that country. And we processed in, and for about 2 or 3 days of stay in Ton Snook Air Base, we would do normal duties that were required for the newcomers to come in and go out. And then I got attached to the 1st Air Cavalry, and was sent by caribou to K, which is sort of in the highlands, and got taken off up there. And I served as a perimeter guard that period of time while I was there, which was right at Christmas. It was like 2 days before Christmas. So K was a funny place because it was sort of up in the mountains, and it wasn't like the jungles or anything like that. Fairly cool in the evening, and we would do guard duty and normal things that would protect that small area. And then I wasn't there more than a week or two. And the 1st Air Cavalry was moving from K, which they had been there for quite a while. They were moving into a more active area, which was called the Fishhook area of right above Saigon. It was in a 1 day's truck ride to Saigon, and it was called Phuc Vinh. Pretty big base, never got overrun, as far as I know, but I got there, and they attached me with 11th Cav, and I was there not too long, maybe a month or two, and then all of a sudden I had a warrant officer track me down. I thought, oh, what does this guy want, And he came to me, Mr. Bliss was his name, and he asked me if I would volunteer to go with him and support him in his duties. And I got to thinking about, if you're in the infantry, it's not a really great occupation or endeavor to be in. So I weighed the two things, either to go with him and volunteer, not really sure what it was for, or stay where I was at. So I volunteered. And Mr. Bliss took me under his wing. He was 43 years old when his National Guard unit was activated. And he was a check pilot for the Army. And he could fly anything. He could fly helicopters. He could fly fixed-wing airplane, whatever they gave him. And his duties were varied every day. He would go to operations and get the mission for the day. And he took me out to the revetments where they had some planes stationed. They usually put the planes between sandbag revetments so they don't get damaged. They shot a lot of rockets attacks daily. So took me out and he said, "What do you know about this plane?" And I looked at it and I said, "Oh, it's a Havilland Beaver, fixed wing airplane, fly about 110 knots at a dive speed, no armament whatsoever." And he said, "I'm almost afraid to fly this plane, and I understand that you have experience," which I did. I worked for a major airline and had been trained here in Pittsburgh. So I said, "Yeah, I can take care of this." And he said, "Well, really appreciate it," because he was really afraid of flying. And, if something would happen while you're out someplace, you're like history, you know what I mean? So I didn't have any tools. I was a grunt. And so I said, "I don't have any tools. I don't have any." He said, "We'll fly down to Saigon. Are you a good scrounger?" And I said, "Pretty good." He said, "I'm going to drop you off, and you're going to try and get what you need to fix this plane." I said, "Okay." So we went down. I picked up all the stuff I needed, and they were really, really helpful. Came back, and I started working on the plane, and got it to where it was pretty reliable. He was really, really happy. And then every day he would go down to operations as an officer and get the mission for the day. And then he would come back and I'd have everything ready. And I'd take my flak jacket and my M16, and you put the flak jacket on the seat, because there's no armament. And we flew, like I say, 100 knots. It's just not very fast. And a lot of the missions were pretty low level. You could see 1,000 feet, kind of like shooting clay pigeons. And we traveled together from then on. He took care of me like I was his son, basically. I had some pilot training. I could fly, but I never flew anything that big, which is really not very big. And I remember the very first day he said, we're flying, and we landed at a remote place, no runways. A lot of times I land on a road. And he said, okay, go ahead, take it off. I said, really? He said, yeah, go ahead. So, I took off like normal, but it's a tail dragger, and I wasn't used to that. And after I got off the ground, it started to meander to the right. And he said, are you going to give it any rudder? So, as time went on, he would train me, because a lot of his missions were for him to go into a village by himself with a 45. And he would pick up the informant or whatever he was supposed to pick up and come back, and I would stay with the plane. And he said, if I don't come back, within a certain amount of time, then you take off and go back to Phuc Vinh, which that never did happen, but it could have, I'm sure. But it was just it was an unbelievable experience, so to speak. And it was all because of his attitude and his depending on me for one thing, and I was depending on him for everything else. We flew into many, many places, and he came up for a mission one day. He said, oh, we're going to have a Vietnamese rider today. And I said, we are? He said, yeah. He said, he's coming up, and there's an NVA battalion in this quadrant that we're supposed to fly to. And he said, they want us to fly at 1,000 feet. And they brought speakers up. I took the rear door off the airplane, and we put these speakers, which were, 4 foot by 4 foot. And he was going to talk on radio into the speakers, and I was supposed to drop out leaflets, Chu Hoi leaflets. So we flew out, and the Vietnamese guy never showed up. It wasn't very long. They sent us a tape and a tape recorder, and I thought, this is not good. 1,000 feet's not very high up, and if there's an MBA battalion out there, we probably ain't coming back. You know what I mean? So we flew out at like 10,000 feet, and Warren said, okay, go ahead and get your stuff set up, get the boxes open, and we're going to fly out in this area here, and I'm going to drop down, and then we'll put out the leaflets. And you put the tape recorder on so they can hear and all that. We wanted them to surrender, basically. So we flew out, and by the time we got down to about, a couple thousand feet, we started getting shot at, you know what I mean? So we climbed back up to where we're at a safe level, and Warren, he turned around and he said, throw them boxes out, see if you could hit somebody. We flew around for a while, and then we came back. Unbeknownst to us, when I was throwing out the leaflets before we threw the boxes out, there's a access hole on the bottom of the airplane to access the cables, and I had them spread, and I had made a little chute, but I never thought about where they were going. I thought they were going out, but they went onto the rear tail wheel and piled up, knee deep. And we didn't know that. I couldn't see back there, but when we landed back at Phuc Vinh, they had Chu Hoi leaflets everywhere on the airport property, because as soon as the tail wheel hit, they flew off. And so that was quite an experience that day. And if it wasn't, like I said, if it wasn't for Mr. Bliss, we would have probably gotten shot down. I mean, it was just obvious that anybody could have shot us in the ground. So simple. Some of the other notable experiences were we flew up to Song Bay. It's the runway was on the outside of the perimeter. So we landed, and we taxied down. We were supposed to pick up 2 grunts that had been out in the field for a while, and they were on a special mission too. They didn't tell us, but and we taxied down the runway. The runway was such that it sort of went downhill, and it was on the outside of the perimeter, so you had to go to the center of the runway to get inside the perimeter. And they had a bunch of mountain yards there that were putting up sandbags, and we taxied in, and I don't even think we shut the engines off, shut the engine off. So Warren got out, and I stayed with the plane, and then here he come with these 2 grunts. They were just loaded up. They had everything. They had M79s, they had Claymore mines, they had hand grenades. They had been out, and they piled in the airplane, and I turned over and looked at Warren. He said, "Boy, we're really pretty heavy." And this Song Bay was in an area where there was a big mountain on this side and nothing on the other, and there was trees on both ends. So it was hot too, and so we started the taxi out to get on the runway, and there was a caribou landing, and he got about halfway down, and we had a rocket attack, which actually hit their fuel dump. They were really accurate. They could step things off, and they put them on like little sticks, and they could shoot them rockets pretty accurately. And just about the time that caribou saw that the fuel dump exploded, he went around, and we're slated to take off, but we got to get on the runway. And I'm looking at Warren, he's looking at me, and he said, "We're going," And I knew we were really, really heavy. I should have actually stayed. He should have put me out and taken these 2 guys that were probably a lot more important back to where they needed to go. And we taxied on the runway, and we taxied up to the end, and he turned around, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I could just see the sweat beads just rolling down his face. And he powered this thing up as hard as he could before he let the brakes off. And we started down the runway, and I thought, man, I hope we make it, because, there's trees on the end, and you either going to fly or you're going to crash. And he got down to the end, and he did something I never seen anybody else do. He pushed the flaps down so they were up with the wing, and got as much speed as he could. And we got right to the end, and he yanked the flaps in, which broke the suction to the runway. And we got off the ground, and we had to go around 3 times in order to get enough elevation to get over the little mountains and stuff that were there. And we were successful there. Very, very, very lucky that they didn't have the rocket attack when we actually were trying to take off. But I have a few pictures of that.
Tell me about your photography hobby there in Vietnam, because you took a lot of photos.
I did, and it was only because I had this little Kodak box camera, and I took, when I had time, I would just throw it in because it didn't take up much room. And if the opportunity availed itself, then I would take pictures. Like we would be flying over, not real high up, maybe 1,500 feet, 1,000 feet or whatever. And we would have a B-52 strike fairly often in that area. And they make big holes in the ground. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The little swimming pools after it rains for a while. Yeah, so I would take a lot of those rice paddies and, things like that. So I could see a lot of people don't really realize how big a hole, that would make. And
for those younger people who don't know about those little cameras, could you explain what they are and then what the process would be? How would you get your film developed out there in the jungle?
I sent them home. They were, you get 2 little, it's a little round canister about this big, and it's about 1.25 inches long, I suppose. And the box camera opens up, you push a button, and the back opens up, and you put it in there, and you feed it through the little pickup reel, and the other part was in the canister. And you could usually take, some had 12, I think a lot of them had 20. You could take 20 pictures, not like today. you could take 1,000 pictures on a little chip. No, it was much, much different. And then you could either have them developed as slides or pictures. And they could either come that size or bigger. Depends on how much money you wanted to spend. I just had little ones made, so. But actually, that's basically how I was accepted at the VA healthcare system. They had asked me, can you prove that I was in Vietnam? Well, obviously I had the medals and stuff, but they were talking about Agent Orange. So I had snapped a picture. I was guarding a perimeter one day, and this helicopter came, and it was right, a couple of feet from the ground, right in front of me, and they were spraying Agent Orange on the topography in front of me. And when I came across this slide, I got my magnifying glass out to see what it was about, and it was them spraying. So I took that into the VA. I said, "Is this good enough?" And they said, "Oh, it's just a helicopter." I said, "Look at it close." And I said, "They're spraying Agent Orange on the grass," because it wasn't long after that we were back in that same area, and everything was kind of dead. So yeah, they sprayed me and the grass. And so that was $1 million picture. That one, it really was, because it confirmed, that fact that I was kind of associated with Agent Orange, which has affected my health. I have cancer, which I was treated for today. Went downtown to the VA, and the VA treats me like a king. I kid you not. I go down, everybody knows my name. They're so nice. I can park my car, and they have excellent care. I don't care what these new media say. I've been to the Hillman and all the other places, and when I went in today, this real pretty black girl, she took, they have to take my blood every time I go, twice a month, and they've never missed taking my blood one time. They never have to restick me. They're truly experts. I can't say enough good about the VA. They really are. They're really treating the vets, especially the World War II vets that come in. A lot of them are 90 or older. They go to their house, they pick them up, they bring them in, they stay with them all day, take them back home. What hospitals are going to do that? Come on. No, it's not possible.
Did other people have cameras that you remember?
I'm sure there were, but in my case, I was only associated with, my warrant officer and me. So, and I was with him the whole time until I left Vietnam in '69, right before Christmas. So I spent a year there.
I'm just curious how prevalent it was to take photographs of.
I don't think it was all that prevalent. I really, you're trying to make sure you don't get killed. Taking a picture of that probably isn't all that important. No.
Well, that's why it really fascinates me.
Yeah, well, it's in a plane, and you're flying along. You may fly for an hour or 2 or 3 or whatever, and my job on the plane was, and Warren never told me at first. He said, "I want you to listen to this frequency, and if you hear any beeps, let me know." Okay, so I dial it in. I'm sitting there, and he'll fly a while, and I'd fly a while, and one day I had my curiosity. I don't know what sparked my interest. I said, "Warren, I'm not ever hearing any beeps." And he said, "Well," I said, "that's a good thing." I said, "Well, why am I listening for these beeps?" He said, "Well, if you hear it beeping, they're locked on. SAM missiles locked on, but it never really happened." So, yeah, but it was funny. Like after he said that, I thought, "Oh man, thanks for telling me." I'll pay more attention now. Then I said, "Well, let me ask you something. What do we do when I hear the beeps? He said, it's all over. You can't outfly it, you know what I mean? 100 knots.
So what was the point of listening?
Well, just to let you have that short period of time to say goodbye. Yeah, no,
Wow.
it was quite he was quite the guy. I often wish I stayed in contact with him.
When's the last time you had contact with
When
him?
I left Vietnam,
That was it.
I should have researched him and found out where he lived, and sent him a thank you card, if nothing else. But I met a lot of other people. We flew artillery spotting also. Matter of fact, on that DVD, there's a rubber plantation we're flying around above, and as we flew around, there was NVA was in the rubber plantation, which they didn't want you to shoot because it was French owned, and rubber trees are, I guess, fairly expensive. So, yeah, we flew around, and then we would spot artillery. We had the Havilland Beavers, which is a radial 450 horsepower engine, and then we had bird dogs, smaller, forward and aft placement, and you'd have a captain or somebody flying, and you would be the spotter, so to speak. So, and then they would send in, the Air Force would send in a OV-10 with rocket pods. We had rocket pods too, but we didn't have rocket pods on the Beaver. Too much weight, I guess, or whatever. They would shoot the rocket at the point where they wanted the jets to target on. So
Were these kind of crews common? I mean,
they were in my group, yeah.
In your group,
Yeah, we had. There was First Air Cavalry. I think it was 11th Aviation Group. They had bird dogs and beaver. We had two beavers, which I lost mine. We crashed on the runway. Well, in the perimeter, and then they got me another one right away. And then we had a series of, I think, 6 bird dogs. And then the other aviation group, they had Mohawks, twin engine, very, very fast photographic. You could actually hear the camera go off. They would fly at night, real low level at about 380 knots. And they would shoot this camera off, which you could actually hear. They shot all 10 of those. When I was there, every one of those got shot down. So it was a very, very dangerous mission, that one, because of you could time. It'd go boom, 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 and you could time where it was going to be and how fast it was going. That low to the ground, they didn't have much of a chance. And then, after they would crash, if they survived the crash, they probably didn't survive anything else.
And did you have special training to help you if you did crash out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I had gone to Fort Polk. I was infantry when I went into the service. So yes, the rest of them, I'm not sure what kind of training they had.
I mean, like survivalist training. Do you have that?
Yeah, I mean, While I was in Fort Polk, they had returnees from Vietnam, and they were cadre. They would let us off in the middle of the night in a swamp, and you had to make your way from where they left you off to home base, and they would, you'd have to make your way, and 2 people at a time would go. They left you off along the road, and you had to go that way. I remember that was a very interesting time. I had a New York policeman. Me and him led off in the swamp. In Louisiana, they have these little pygmy rattlesnakes, and they have that, and they have armadillos. And we were going through the woods, and this guy was chit-chattering the whole time. And I said, if you don't shut up, we're going to get caught. And we got down to where I could hear water running. It was raining, And I said, just stay here. I'll ford across the creek. And when I get to the other side, I'll kind of, give you a high sign or whatever. Go ahead, come on over. And I got across, and I gave him, a little yell or whatever. And then he started across, and he fell in the creek, which was pretty deep. And he lost his weapon. And we searched in water up to here. Never did find it. We got back, and that sergeant came to him, and we were all in line. Where's your weapon at, soldier? He had to tell him it was gone in the creek. Oh, it was like the world came to an end. Yeah.
Did the Vietnamese target the scouting planes and the?
No, I don't think they did, because we never really got shot down. But the little kids, they would leave them on some bases at certain times of the week, and you really never knew who was friendly and who wasn't. They had been at war in that country forever with the French and everybody else. They were really well aware of their status, and they were trying to get their status a little bit above what it was with whoever. So anybody could offer them more than they had, they were willing to listen to, I think. Kids were real nice, and like I say, you never really knew who was stepping off what for that night. They would pace off from one location to the next inside of a perimeter, and then would pass that information off to the people setting up a rocket attack or whatever for that evening or during the day. I mean, it didn't matter what time of the day it actually was, but like I say, they were pretty accurate. They could set them on some bamboo sticks and start. When you were, well, we had a number, but the one I remember vividly was it came right down between our bunker, and when something's exploding like that with these great big pieces of cast iron that are all jagged, and it's flying everywhere, and you're trying to get under whatever you can get under, because you really can't fight anybody because there's nobody there to fight, and you wind up with. Woke up in the morning and I found this great big chunk that was stuck in the barrel. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, if that hits you, we had one guy got hit in the back, and oh man, I'm talking about doing some damage, you know what I mean? That amazing how people want to kill somebody else, how they want to do it, They didn't actually want to kill you. They wanted to create more problems for that group that was there, I think.
When did you come home?
Right before Christmas. I was there for Christmas, and
what years? What are we talking
69. About? I went in 68, right the end of 68, December, and I came back in 69. Yeah, it was 1 year service in the foreign country. So,
what was your trip home like?
Pretty exciting. Yeah, you anticipate leaving someplace you didn't really intend to be, and about a month before you're going to get out, and some guys re-upped. They offered them a few $1,000s to stay. I did not, because I already had a job. My life was sort of set up, and but that a lot of people got killed like the day before they left, or that kind of a scenario, in which you were pretty protective of where you wanted to be, when you're a short timer. So in my case, I flew with Warren, and he didn't have another crew chief at that point. that understood what they had to do. And the only reason I knew what I was supposed to do is because I was flying the plane, and I didn't really, want to crash. We had a few incidents where, one day we were flying to Like and the prop seal blew out, and all the oil come out of the front of the constant speed prop and went all over the windshield. So you couldn't really see where we were going. But he was an excellent pilot. So we landed in Like, and then he said, "Can you fix it?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I think I can." Didn't have any tools with us, so I scrounged around, went down a motor pool and got some old rubber seals, and we got oil, and we got home. But you had to be pretty creative, so to speak. But as you got longer into your tour of duty there, you wanted to, when you got close to where you could go home, you had that, I don't want to go there because, I only got 3 days left or 4 days left or whatever. You just wanted to hide under a rock somewhere, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So you had that anticipation of that last day, and you were able to get around, at least I was, to meet the people that you served with while you were there. And they knew that you were leaving, and you wanted to say your goodbyes and wish them luck in the rest of their time. So yeah, you had to be sort of careful. And Warren, I was only in the service 21 months, and I went from a private to a 5th class, which is really, really unusual. And, I was put in for the flying medal and all that stuff. So that, and I attribute that all to Mr. Bliss. I say he treated me, I can't even imagine anybody else, you know what I mean? But, that last day, I think Warren flew me down to Saigon. I think he did. I can't remember. But we flew down and we said our goodbyes, and I waited for that magic number to get on that Freedom Bird to come back to the United States. We flew back to Oakland, and
was that a commercial plane?
Yes, yeah.
So all returning GIs.
Not all of them, I think.
No?
Yeah, in my case it was, and landed in Oakland, and then got a change of clothes because you would leave with what you had on, which I didn't have a lot of clothes because I moved so much. I had a duffel bag when I went to Vietnam, but I have no idea where any of that stuff went. Wherever you got to where you were going, get on and get a pair of pants or whatever, and got clothed up and got the things that you needed, like M16 and armament and stuff like that.
So what was it like when you finally arrived home
Good.
here? It was good, huh?
It was good, yeah. Yeah.
Did you have people waiting here to see you when you came?
Not in Oakland, no. I had told my mom to send a letter to TWA. That's who I work for in New York, and tell them I'm coming home, and I need a ticket from Oakland to Pittsburgh. And I guess they had wired it or something, because I got new clothes, and they check you out and everything that you have to do for the service, and then went down I got a ride down to the airport. I don't remember how that worked, but I got there and went to the ticket counter, and sure enough, there was that freedom ride home to Pittsburgh, and flew into Pittsburgh, and no fanfare at all. I mean, it was my family, my mom and my dad, and my brother had lived in Chicago, so he wasn't there. And they greeted me. We got in a car and, went back home. And all the guys I had hung around with came over the next day, to greet me home. But there wasn't much fanfare. really. A lot of the guys didn't really want to wear their uniform.
Yeah, tell me about that. Were you aware of the anti-war movement here and the protests?
Not as much as I became aware of it after I got home. There was a pretty big movement going on, let me tell you. And they were not happy with what was going on. We didn't have any control over that. The GIs that went to Vietnam, they went to protect those people that were, out there, whatever. And so we didn't have anything to do with that.
And what was going on here in Pittsburgh regarding the anti-war movement?
Not too much. It wasn't like San Francisco and LA and those places where you had, like Joan Baez and, all those important people that had the news media captured, so to speak. They told their story, but you got to realize their story was from here. It wasn't from where I was at in my location. So I'm not so sure how they knew all the information that they knew. Maybe they made some of it up. I don't really know, but it wasn't like everybody was involved in My Lai or something. You know what I mean? That was a remote situation, and it was just really, really highlighted. They forgot to highlight the people that are laying in the, in a ditch somewhere trying to survive.
What was your response to those people who were
Well,
protesting?
I wasn't real fond of that. The Jane Fondas and those that had prominence and had their voice heard. It may have helped, sort of stop the war, or at least take another look at it. The Nixon eras was quite interesting. Actually, President Nixon came to Saigon once while we were trying to fly into Tonsnook Air Base. And we tried to land, and they said, there's a lot of tricky dicky down here today, and it wouldn't let us land. So we flew around until we got pretty low on gas, and then I guess he had moved on, and we landed. That's what it was all about, was Nixon. He came. And I don't know if you can blame that whole thing on one person.
Right.
I don't think you can. It was just a time that came and went, and
it was complicated.
It was very, very complicated.
Now, did you find yourself compelled to sort of tell people back here, hey, this is what it was like over there? No?
No. You didn't want to do that. You didn't want anybody to know where you were. You really didn't, because first off, you didn't have a job. You weren't getting one. It was very, very difficult, because they thought we were all crazy, And second off, that some of the things that they talked about that happened was really rare, or sparsely happening. Different things, different places.
The baby killing and all that.
Yeah,
like that. It may have happened.
It did.
Crazy,
I'm sure it did.
But it was so rare.
But wars is not, it's not a picnic. It's not a picnic. So they're going to kill you, or you're going to kill them. It's that simple. So, I was there, and I wanted to survive, which I did. But I was very fortunate. There's a lot of others that didn't. Like today, you have all these things in Iraq and ISIS. I hope some of the ISIS people come to a gun show here. I hope. Because they're not going to be shooting at somebody who doesn't have a gun. Yeah, they're all cowards. They want to set something off in the middle of nowhere while they're not there, with a radio or whatever. It ain't like World War II vets are my heroes. You had Germans there, and you had Americans here, and a lot of others, and they fought it out. Vietnam was a little different. It was hide and go seek. hide during the day, come out at night, blow something up, kill somebody or whatever. So the wars have changed dramatically over a short period of time.
Now, do you belong to the Vietnam Veterans of America chapter?
I haven't done that. I need to do that, but I should do that. And because there's a lot of people there that I might even have served with.
Well, I asked that because
the one in Beaver, I guess, is the biggest in the United States, isn't it?
it's third largest.
Third largest.
Largest in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But we interview quite a few folks from there. And, people were talking about their experiences now.
Yeah,
that wasn't always the case.
No.
When for you did, or maybe you haven't, I don't know. I'm just curious. Obviously, it wasn't when you came back right away.
Absolutely not.
When did you start to talk about your experiences?
Well, I'm not sure if there's an exact date. Well, not long ago when I was invited to go over to Penn State and speak for 10, 15 minutes. And there was a lot of questions that were asked that I realized at that point that that time period has gone by. And it's almost like the Holocaust, they're trying to keep that in the forefront. But I guess if I'm asked, depending on who you're talking to, you can divulge some things that are okay to talk about, I think. But yeah.
Well, we find it. I mean, there are some things that people have experienced that they're just not willing to talk about.
Sure, and I can understand that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then there are other people just don't even just care to talk about it. That part of their life is just in the past.
Yeah, it's gone.
And other people think that nobody's interested.
That might be the case right there. You don't think anybody's interested.
Yeah, no one's asking you for your story, so therefore you think it's probably not interested. Nobody cares.
They're not interested.
Yeah,
they're on a cell phone, text messaging, and all that. So, yeah, that time period is gone. But there are some people that will sit down and they may know that you were there. See, that's the problem now. A lot of people have forgotten the Vietnam time period, and they wouldn't know if you were there or not. So how are they going to bring it up? Whatever.
You've talked at the Veterans Breakfast Club storytelling events.
Yeah, well, I think once. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I did. Todd asked me to say something once.
I think I've you a couple times talked. Yeah.
My mind is kind of comes and goes. Sometimes I forget.
Well, I asked that because I'm just curious. Was that a comfortable experience?
Oh, sure. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there were other veterans there, and I mean, you felt...
yeah, it doesn't really bother me much at this point, and I'm fine with talking about it, and, kind of proud that I didn't go to Canada or, get married or stay in college or whatever. I just did what I was asked to do and get drafted. Well, I mean, I could have joined... A lot of guys did join after they got their draft notice. But I didn't do that. I just followed along and did the best I could with what I had. And I turned out okay. I didn't get killed and probably helped a lot of people from getting killed.
Well, that's a great note to end on.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Thank you, Bob, so much for sharing your story.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm so glad that you were, invited me to tell a short story.